Gary, how you doing?
Doing well.
I am excited to have you on the show. You're going to be speaking on a topic that is near and dear to my heart: how I got my start into my entrepreneurial bug and career in sales. And I know it's one thing that is extremely painful for a lot of entrepreneurs if they did not grow up in the sales function. And I know it's one of those things where it's kind of like this big mysterious black hole. How do you find the high producers? How do you grow sales? How do you do all this stuff? So I, had met you through a couple of our local connections here in the Twin Cities, and your background. I think you were in the copier business as well, and you had some exposure. And so you guys have done what I enjoy, Gary, about what you guys have is you've built a framework around how to actually assess this. So why don't you, for the listeners that are not familiar with you or Pivotal, why don't you just kind of give them the short version of the story that you told me about how you got to where you are today, and then kind of the thought behind the framework.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I myself am a lifelong sales guy, just like you. Started in the copier business, brutal job, banging on doors, getting chased out of buildings. Actually got chased out of a building once.
Yeah.
Did that though. Lifelong sales guy. First job out of school, sold copiers. Then I sold desktop publishing equipment for a period of time. I sold high-end servers and storage and networking gear to Fortune 1000 companies. Got on with a startup at the time, e-commerce company. When I started, I was the 23rd employee, and we were $1 million big in revenue. And when I left 11 years later, we were $400 million and 1,400 employees across the globe. And that's where we learned a lot about how do you scale a business. So how do I get the things in place where I can take an average, a B player or a C player off the street, and if they work the system and they run the playbook, then they can be successful. And while I was in that tremendous growth spurt with that last company, my brother called me up and he said, hey, we always wanted to work together, so what do you want to do? And I was traveling like a madman, and I said, sure, I'm ready to get off the hamster wheel. And we started this thing, and his company had gone from 75 million to $1 billion, so he had the same type of a hyper growth. And we really focused on what did we do, what types of systems and processes did we put in place that allowed our companies to scale? Because too many companies get to a certain point and they can't figure out how to grow anymore.
Well, and on that note too, Gary, there's this whole growth consumes capital, and if your business model, you can actually grow yourself out of business, which a lot of people do.
Absolutely, and we see that a lot of times. So we came back and we scribbled on a whiteboard and said, well, what were all the things that we had to do, and what is a really, quote, healthy sales organization? And we kind of came up with 6 different areas, and we said if we had that in all of our companies, boy, would they just take off. So we took it to market and tried it with a few of our different clients, and it's worked. And here we are, 250 clients later, over that, probably closer to 300 now. But applying these 6 factors, and it kind of boils down to, do we have a growth strategy? I can't tell you, Ryan, how many times you go into a place and say, they want to grow 15% a year over 5 years, they're going to double, and that's how it works. And we ask them how, and I get this blank, puzzled look back. And they're not sure if it's going to come from current clients or new industries or new products, or there's no strategy there. And then when I ask them further, well, why you guys versus your competitor? I hear back awesome things like, well, we really care about our customer, and we have awesome customer service, and we have really good people. And everybody says the same thing.
So that's the table stake of being in business, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. But that's what their people are out there selling is, I don't have a strategy and I'm not differentiated. And even like my ideal client, I'll chase anything and everything that moves and can fog a mirror, their prospect. And that doesn't give you the best chance to win. That's awesome when you're a new business, because you need any business to get going.
Yep.
But at some point, your winning percentage goes up much higher with some subset of clients, and we help them figure out what that is. So that's all in strategy. We go to, do we have the right people? Do we know how to hire the right people and onboard them? That's the people section. We go down to process and say, is there a repeatable sales process? We go into a lot of companies and we ask the top guys, how do you find them, get in the door, generate interest, close them, etc. And some of them know it's that, but some of them are this unconscious competence that they don't even know. And then I ask the bottom performers, and it doesn't even sound remotely the same. So how do we get this into a repeatable process that everybody can do?
Mm-hmm.
The 4th one is we move to measurement. Everybody measures sales. That's really easy, but so many companies don't measure the things that lead to sales. Whether it's number of meetings or number of opportunities, or if you're inside sales, it's number of phone calls, or whatever it happens to be. But let's set some standards around those measurements and hold people to those. Because if we measure the activity on the front end, we're going to get the stuff on the back end. The fifth one was, how do we reward people? So pay is obvious one, and making sure that's aligned with strategy. But there's a lot of just basic stuff you can do to recognize people, promote competition, sit down and talk with them about not just the deal of the day or the issue of the day, but you sit down and talk with them about, Ryan, you were supposed to have 5 new opportunities this week. We've been averaging 3. So if we stay on this pace, we'll never hit our goal. What do we need to do differently? That alone, or recognize you because you hit 6. Way to go. Keep that going. But just that alone can drive performance. And then the last one we call is execution. And that's, what is our system for managing all this? How often do we sit down as a team, and what do we do to make that a valuable meeting? How often do we do one-on-ones, and what do we do there? How often are we in the field actually coaching? What does our planning look like? It's our system for how we manage it. And then the big thing that we found when we sat and scribbled this all out, 11, 12 years ago, was the person who's responsible to do all of this stuff is the sales leader. And I would say well over 90% of them have never been trained on any of this stuff. They were really good sellers. And I don't know about you, you got into management at some point, but I know when I stepped in, nobody taught me how to hire or train or coach or set a strategy or develop a comp plan. But I was a good seller, so they promoted me, and now I'm magically supposed to know how to do all of this stuff.
It's so funny, Gary. I think you and I were talking about that. We're like, because it was, to this day, my least favorite job I've ever done was being a sales manager, because that so many, you hear this so many times where they take the great performer and then they make them a manager, but those skill sets are almost never correlated. And and I remember just thinking, well, I just woke up and did my phone calls. How come you can't? And that's not training, and that's not how you lead people. And so yeah, there's a huge gap between performing and actually being a leader.
Yeah, well, and if you look at it, if you're a good salesperson, you know how to identify your prospects, you know how to generate interest, get in the door, you know how to ask great questions, you know how to close, none of that is being a sales leader. None of that is, how do I hire, train, communicate, hold people accountable, have a difficult conversation. They're not even the same thing. But we keep promoting our top person, and then they don't work out, and we go, well, that was a bad thing to do, and we fire them, and then we promote our next top person, and then we keep doing this thing over and over.
So now we're going to get into, how the heck do we stop doing that? How do we build a good team? So I'll kind of tee this up a couple of different things. One is that maybe you can describe what Pivotal does and how you guys go about using this framework for clients. So that way, with 300 clients, that brings you a lot of exposure that gives you some good experience to be able to give this feedback. And then maybe along those lines, Gary, maybe explain in your definition of what sales is in your world, because I think there's this blending of sales and marketing, and especially, for someone that may or may not, on the spectrum of what sales is, I came in from a world where that's the whole organization started with my dad just cold calling, right? I mean, it was 400 appointments, or 400 phone calls, 15 appointments, 5 proposals, 3 closes, $50,000 a month. I mean, it was from day one, whereas an organization that might have been built off of an engineer, a project manager, or something like that doesn't have an understanding what sales is. So maybe, does that make sense, Pivotal, and then kind of what sales is?
Yeah. So, we'll start with kind of the difference between sales and marketing. So I really see marketing as being, and by the way, these two should be in lockstep with each other. But I see marketing as really determining, what is the brand, what is the messaging, who are we going after, what does that target audience look like, how do we generate interest in our products, how do we establish who we are. And some of that really crosses into sales, because sales also has to be really good at our messaging and making sure we're going after the right targets, and that our differentiation is clear and whatnot. But I really see marketing as establishing who we are and who we're going after, and then sales as executing on that. You get the lead, or you generate your own lead, and now it's leveraging some of the marketing materials, but you're using all that to actually close the business.
Right. And I just a little comment on that too, because you and I were talking about, you guys are working on podcasting as well. We're
Yeah.
Marketing creates a digital asset, right? So it's either a podcast or a webinar. So, but then there's got to be interest generated to that. So there's like the digital assets and the brand and all that stuff, but there's still got to be people behind the scenes working the deal.
Yeah, and I would say as technology progresses and as social and digital and everything else progresses, they're blending a heck of a lot more, and they're coming together. And I've heard the term smarketing several times, where they're kind of mashing together. But at the same time, I would say that the more complex your product is, the more it needs explanation, the more expensive it is for sure. You need sales to create that value, to create that differentiation, to really dig into a person's needs. There's not a marketing piece I've seen anywhere that can really ask a lot of really good questions about what do you need? Why do you need that? Have you thought about this? What if you had that? What impact would it have on you? There's not marketing that does that. That's the job of a salesperson.
Well, and maybe as one last little note on this too, and this might open it up to like the different types of industries and your kind of ideal clientele too, because so like I was at an online digital marketing. Well, it was online entrepreneurs. It was a conference, 140 entrepreneurs, e-commerce, SaaS companies, that kind of stuff, where there's people in there that are spending 10 grand a day on Facebook ads because they got everything built out from the client acquisition cost to how they're doing all this stuff. But like, it's, business to consumer, and they're selling sunglasses, right? I mean, and it's Amazon. So it's an Amazon store or an e-commerce thing where it might not be as applicable to the sales world that we're talking about. There might be more customer service or something like that. So maybe given that, the digital marketing world has grown, and I think a lot of people use that as a way to avoid the conversation we're about to have today. Because, so what industries is this applicable to, size companies, and what does the kind of the sales function look like?
Yeah, we apply it mostly to B2B. So if you're selling sunglasses, you're selling, tchotchkes, whatever you're selling online to consumers, I think that is a lot more of a marketing play. I mean, even when you go buy a car today, largely that's taken care of. You can go online, you can watch videos, you can read reviews, you can do all that. And the price is even established for that matter in a lot of cases. So that's more of a marketing play. When you're selling something that can help a business make money, save money, avoid risk, be more efficient or whatnot, and that requires a lot more interaction and question asking and evaluation of needs and all the rest of that, that's where it really plays. So I see it in manufacturing, technology, software, SaaS type of environments. Professional services is another one, because you're selling yourself as a solution, whether you're an accountant or an architect or a banker or whatever else. That's selling. A lot of those people don't consider themselves sales people. They don't even like the word sales. They like BD or business development. It's the same thing.
Vice president. Every banker's a vice president, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. We actually worked with an accountant once, and they said, you can't use the word sales in here. If you're going to come in here and you're going to talk about what we're going to do, it's not sales. And I talked to the accountants, and they said, no, we don't like to sell. I said, do you have products or services or offerings that you do that can help other people? Yes. Do they need those? Yes. So if you explain it to them and you help them, guess what? You're in sales. That's what selling is.
Yeah. Daniel Pink, to sell is to be human. You're selling, like, I have to sell to my wife why I'm able to go out with my friends, right? And leave the family. That might be the hardest sale ever, but it's still.
Yeah. You want to see a good salesperson? When your kids want something, they are awesome salespeople, the most tenacious people in the world.
I love it. So explain how then you take what you're just describing, and what does the typical sales department look like, and what is it that you guys are doing to help the owners and the companies get to scale effectively? Like you said.
Yeah. So I look at the start of a company. We call it like the infant stage or the go stage, and basically in those companies, everybody sells. Everybody does everything. I might send out an email. I might actually do a demo. I might actually close the deal, and then I will run to the back and I ship it out and I do everything. And people wear lots of hats and they do all kinds of stuff. And that works for a lot of companies for a certain period of time. And usually in those cases, the president or CEO or owner is the sales leader and the salesperson and everything else, and they run a small team. At some point, that doesn't scale anymore. You need to get some specialization. That's usually when we bring in a sales leader to run that team. And the CEO goes and does CEO stuff set strategy and manage admin and finance and whatnot. But at some point, you have a sales team and you have a sales leader, and now we're focused on different types of things to go after. And that's really where we play, is when companies try to get past that, I need to grow, I need to scale. Yep. Now I need a repeatable sales process in place. I need to make sure that salespeople have a plan for how they're going to get there. I want to make sure my comp plan lines up with that strategy, because too many comp plans are, I'm going to pay you 5% on everything you sell. Well, that just told the salesperson sell anything and everything to anybody you want. And
regardless of the margins.
Yeah, right. And that might not even be what our strategy is. So, if our strategy is go get new customers, that's what we want you to focus on. Well, great. I'm going to pay you a higher percentage on those new customers than existing customers. So, there's all kinds of complexity there. Mm-hmm. When we get involved, a lot of these companies have bumped up against that ceiling. They got to a certain point. Maybe they even have sales leaders in there, but they can't figure out how to scale. They can't figure out how to get past, one or two top salespeople doing most of the revenue for the team. Mm-hmm. So when we get in there, those 6 areas I mentioned before, we evaluate what's in place. Maybe they have an awesome strategy, but they don't have a sales process. Maybe they have both of those things, but our comp plan's messed up. Maybe there's no accountability. Maybe the strategy is getting lost from CEO's head down to what we're actually executing on the street. Mm-hmm. Usually the things that we see when companies get stuck is they try to, quote, fix sales, and they will fire the sales leader. That's the number one thing they go to. By the way, random fact, average tenure of a new sales leader, 20 months. They get
really?
Yeah, 20 months. They get pretty impatient with the sales leader, and they boot them out, and then they promote somebody, and they just do the cycle over and over again.
Well, that's so interesting too, because and when you and I were sitting down having coffee, this ties into even my world of value creation and making a valuable company. I mean, literally, repeatable sales process will increase the value of your company. Period. And so the thing is, what I see is like when owners and they're sitting there going, okay, I need. When they don't understand value creation, they beg for revenue, right? So it's all these quick fixes to get more revenue with a lot of and I can't imagine the pressure that you probably have to be pretty selective. Someone that understands that they're just not just grabbing for revenue to essentially be juggling more cash flow, which is essentially what happens. So that I can make sense why you got a sales leader that they're not hitting their goals. It's just whack it and figure it out. And
yep, must be the wrong people. Made a bad sales leader choice. Set bad sales people. So that's a fix. They like to send people to sales training because that's a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. But being kind of a smart aleck, I always ask the CEO, so have you ever invested in sales training before? Oh, sure. And when I say, and right after that, sales just took off, right? It just skyrocketed. And they were like, no. Well, I think there's a lot of really good sales training out there, but the sales leader who's supposed to reinforce it is learning at the same time as everybody else, and they're supposed to be the experts all of a sudden. We don't reinforce it. We don't coach to it. 30, 60 days later, everybody's back to their old habits. So that's a common fix. And then the other one is we mess with their comp plan because we want to, quote, motivate them. And
which you want to piss off a group of people, do that.
Oh, my God, yeah. Mess with them. And salespeople are so funny anyway, because you get to this this point where you say, I'm going to change the plan, and they're completely ticked off. And they say, you're trying to screw me over and you're trying to take money and blah, blah, blah. And they'll do that for about 6 months. And then they'll say, don't change the comp plan. Because now they like the comp plan because they figured out how to play the comp plan.
Yeah.
But that's a funny thing. You're right. You make people upset. Those 3 things, again, firing, sales training, and comp plan, they're never the answer. It's never one thing. So back to one of your original questions, what do? We go in there and we figure out what's in place and what's not. Strategy, do we have good strategy? Are we differentiated? Do we have the right people on the team? Do we know how to hire the right people? Is there a repeatable sales process? Are we measuring, et cetera, all those things I talked about before? And we find out what's in place and what's not in place. And then we work, we'll do a couple different things. Most of the time, the clients that we have a sales leader. We work one-on-one with that sales leader to close those gaps. Maybe they don't have good accountability. Maybe they don't have a repeatable sales process. Maybe they're not a good coach. That happens a lot. We ask, by the way, if you ask sales leaders, 100% of them say that they're awesome coaches. and then we listen to them, and we'll see it one-on-one, and then we'll go, okay, Ryan, well, this deal's going sideways, so you should do this and then do that and then call this guy and then come back to me and tell me what's going on. That's not coaching. That's telling people what to do.
Or how many sales leaders do you have it where they grab every monkey for their reps? Just bring me out on the deal. Bring me out on the deal. And essentially the sales managers just has like essentially 10 worker bees around them and just playing whack-a-mole.
If I'm completely honest with myself, that was my first sales leadership role. That's exactly what I did.
That's exactly what
promoted.
I did too.
Everybody teed them up. I knocked them down. I thought it was the funnest job in the world until I burned myself out and we weren't growing. And not until I got help and said, I can't do it. I got to make them good so they don't need me. That's when we really started making some progress. But you're right. That's exactly what happened.
So, yeah, and a couple of things that I want to do is, as we kind of, because we could peel apart all these different 6 factors, but maybe what I'd like to do, Gary, is like one of the biggest things that as we walk into our clients or they're walking out of the boot camp, we're talking about this specific value driver, is it either scares the living shit out of them because they weren't a salesperson. They don't know how to hire salespeople. And it's almost the equivalent back 10 years ago when I was trying to hire a CFO and I didn't know anything about numbers. So you don't know how to hire the other person. However, in our philosophy, you have to have all these 8 key drivers in balance to effectively grow profitably and to grow the value of your company. So then, one of the things that we really challenge our listeners and our clients to do is, if you're instead of solving for annual income and pulling as much money out of the company, between salaries, distribution, and perks, and then flipping that and focusing on value creation, which means you have to invest in your business to do these kind of things. You have to decouple yourself, because a lot of the owners, or they have these people that they're trying to get as much sales with as little investment as possible, which if you can decouple that, then you say, okay, well then where do you invest in these gaps like you're talking about? Because you're going to increase the value of your company and significantly by creating a repeatable sales process. So then if maybe it's you or your brother, what does a machine look like to you? Like, what would a day or a week, or like from an owner's perspective, what does it feel like and what does it consist of? And then we can maybe go into some of the major common things that you see that are ways to get there.
Yeah. So if I see a really good sales organization, everybody knows who we're aimed at. We're all chasing the right target market. We've defined it and we're all chasing that. So we're not chasing the one-off, this could be huge kind of stuff, but we're chasing our target market.
Yeah.
We all have a consistent message. We know how to differentiate. We know how to leverage what our differentiation is. We have good people systems, and we can go down that hole in a second, but we don't just hire somebody because they came from the industry and they have a good track record. And by the way, they have a lot of contact.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And even if we do hire well, we have good onboarding systems to get them up to speed. You've mentioned repeatable sales process a bunch of times, and I love that. That's a piece of it. But we all have a similar methodology for how do we get in the door? What questions do we ask? How do we move them along the process? I don't leave a step in the process until I've completed that part of the process. Too often you'll get a less experienced rep who we start talking, you say, that's really cool. How much is it? Can you give me a proposal? And we go, sure. And we just jump right over that part. And we lost all our ability to differentiate and build value and everything. Every salesperson has a plan for how they're going to hit their number. If you have a $2 million quota, it's not, I'm going to work hard. It's here's how much is coming from my current clients. I need to find these 5 new clients that are going to average this much. Based on that, I need to generate this many opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. They have a plan. We have a comp plan that aligns with whatever strategy we're driving. And we've got a leader, keeps people accountable and develops them so the leader doesn't need to be on everything. And if you've got that, you're not reliant on just a couple salespeople at the top. Everybody knows how to execute. They're all running the same play. That's a healthy sales organization.
Yeah. And I can just feel the breath of fresh air it would be like to have that as in your organization. So if you got, I don't know, Gary, with all the different industries that you've been a part of, and I've same thing like you listed. We're professional services, e-commerce, manufacturing, like the whole works, right? I came up in a world where sales was the driving factor, right? But then if you go into these, manufacturing, it might be like they're really good at their systems and their operations and lean manufacturing, whatever. And the owner's going, whatever you guys just talked about, Ryan and Gary, it scares the living shit out of me. I don't even know how to hire these people, right? They don't even know where to start because someone that is so maybe we talk about like how you get with the people thing. They get like this, the unicorn, and then they think they're going to want equity right away, or they're going to they're going to be impossible to rein in because it's going to be the loose cannon that's selling. How do you, does that make sense to curb that fear?
I want to address one other thing you said, and then I'll jump into the people part. Okay. So it amazes me. We go ask these CEOs or these owners all the time, tell me about manufacturing. And is there a process? Oh yeah, there's a process, and here's how it is. It's all written down. Do you deviate from the process? Oh my God, no, we don't deviate from the process. And how do you measure it? Oh, we've got these measures, and we know if these metrics are on target. And we train people on it, and we hire people who know how to do these particular things in the operation. That's phenomenal. Then we'll ask about finance, and they'll say all the same things. Then we'll ask about logistics, and they'll say all the same things. And then we'll ask about sales, and they'll go, I don't have a clue. It's the same stuff. It is the same stuff. There's a process, there's measurement, there's coaching, there's accountability. We don't deviate from it. So when we framed it up like that for some owners, they're like, oh, it's starting to make sense. And then we show them what those processes look like. Mm-hmm. So hopefully for your listeners, that's helpful to think about. Sales is just like operations or manufacturing or finance or anything else.
I was going to say one comment on that, and then I want to get into your people part is, so I read this book. I don't know if you're familiar with Jeb Blunt from Sales Gravy. He's got The Fanatical Prospector, and he's got this one called Objections. And what I find really interesting about like sales in general is that all those different departments that you listed have very repeatable processes, and they're very technical, but like rejection is not necessarily a part of it. And as humans, our egos are so much in control most of the time, and we all hate getting rejected, and we all hate not getting the affirmation. And in sales, you get the shit kicked out of you every single day, and you have to be okay being called an idiot. And so like, I think so many people just stay away from it, which is why I've seen so many people spend too much money in digital marketing to avoid talking to people and getting rejected. It's a lot. It's like this mystical, like maybe we'll get sales without having to deal with that. So does that make sense? I don't know if that ties into your people part of how you address that. And maybe it's the type of people that you're hiring, or, so from an industry that might not be used to having in-person sales leaders.
Yeah, I think it ties more to sales process. It's, with any given company in any given industry, there's probably 5 or 6 common objections that come up all the time. And if you know what they are, and you know what your answer is to that, and we've trained on it, and I'm a big fan of heading off those objections before they even come up. If you know that somebody's going to ask you about, I don't know, price or something else, you talk about it up front so it doesn't come up later. Mm-hmm. And you qualify it on the front end. And if you know that they're going to ask you about, I'm making stuff up, your warranty or whatnot, you talk about the warranty before they talk about it. But that's just part of the process.
Yep.
I think any decent salesperson, if you teach them what are the most common objections that come up and how do you answer them and how do you head them off, that's all part of the sales process. I think anybody can get past that. Mm-hmm. When it comes to people, I just had this discussion about a week and a half ago, and I had a bunch of CEOs in the room, and I've done this a number of times. And I asked them, when you look to hire a really good salesperson, what do you look for? What skills, traits, attributes, what do you look for? And I hear things back like, well, they have to be really motivated. They have to be good at asking questions. They have to be a good communicator. They're a good people. They're great at relationships. They're motivated by money. And I hear all of these things over and over again. I go, and that's what you interview for. Yep. If they have all those things, that's great. I'm like, if you don't have those, you shouldn't be in sales in the first place. That's anti. That's table stakes to be even in the game.
Yeah.
But that's where a lot of the criteria ends. And by the way, they should come from my industry and they had a good track record in the interview well.
Yeah, and they were working with all the customers that I want.
Right. Yeah. Right. And by the way, none of those, a very small percentage of those customers ever make it across to you anyway.
Totally. Yep.
When we help them hire people, we say, let's go beyond that. Yes, they should have all those things, interview for all those things. They're very important. They got to fit your culture and everything else. That's really important. But then I say, is this person going to be working with current clients or new clients, chasing new clients? Because that's a different skill set. To work with a current client and look for that next opportunity and maintain that relationship and try to expand that is way different than I got to go find a company. I got to figure out who the decision makers are. I have to figure out how to get in the door. I have to maybe displace a competitor. Those are different skill sets.
Totally.
So which one of those do you need? And they're like, oh, that's interesting. I think I need the hunter. I said, okay, are we selling to big companies where there's 5 to 10 decision makers and influencers on the other side, and I got to figure out who they all are and navigate to them and figure out what each person wants and align that? Or am I selling to the purchasing person or the owner? And that's one person. Because that's a whole different sales process and a whole different set of skills. Am I selling the premium product where I have to be able to justify why we are much more expensive, how you're going to get your ROI, why we're different, why you need those differentiators? Or am I the cheap guy? Because I've hired the cheap guy before when I was the premium, that didn't work out so well. Every deal he brought me, if we could just discount boss. No, that didn't work. It's a different set of skills.
It totally is. How about like even solutions versus products?
Yeah, absolutely true. One of my favorites was, are you a lead generator? Because, I had one company said, I need a hunter. Our strategy says we need to add on X amount of new logos per year. We have this finalist. Will you interview him for me? I said, sure. So I went out there and I'm interviewing this guy, and his resume was stellar. It said he led his company in new revenue every year, led his company in number of new accounts every year, went to President's Club, yada, yada, yada. And I sat him down, and we call this behavioral interviewing, but I focused on a particular skill and asked a bunch of questions around that. And I said, so this is really impressive. Tell me, how do you even decide who you're going to go chase? And what does your target market look like? How have you been successful doing that? And his answer was, I assume there's leads. And I said, nope, there's no leads here. It's not a big marketing engine. You have to go find your own. So what would you do? He says, well, I've got a really big network and I'm on LinkedIn. So I would go to everybody who's I'm connected to on LinkedIn and then everybody they're connected to. I said, that's awesome. We call that the friends and family network. Kind of runs out after about 60 to 90 days. So then what would you do?
I would start looking for a new job, right?
Yeah, nothing. He had nothing. So if he would have been in an organization that had a good marketing engine and provided him leads, he would have been awesome. Not this company. And they were ready to hire this guy. And then I shared this feedback and they're like, oh my God, no. So, a particular skill that we needed was the ability to generate your own leads. A particular skill might be selling to big companies or small companies. The skill is selling premium. A skill might be selling direct or selling to a channel, because that's a different skill set. If I'm selling to resellers or distributors or partners, that's way different. I need to stay top of mind. I need to drive accountability. I need to be a good coach or a trainer. I need to go on calls with them. If I'm selling direct, I don't need any of that. I just need to
totally
do it
different.
myself.
Yep.
So, and that list probably goes on 50 deep, but we try to zero in on what are the specific skills we need for your company for this particular role. And when we nail it down to the 4 or 5 that are most important to them, and then we set up our interview process around that, kind of like I did with the guy who's the supposed hunter, boy, your batting average goes way up.
Well, and that it's so, I put an asterisk on everything that you just said, or an exclamation point, because it's just like, it's so important. And I see, like, we had a client recently where they were essentially manufacturer's rep. So they were, again, selling to resellers. And I was like, there's no way he's going to go and hunt. He likes to, and this gentleman in particular, I'm like, he likes to hide most of the time. You can just tell, like, I'm like, there's going to be nowhere to hide. And then I don't know even where maybe this is a good into the systems part too. I think also depending on who you're hiring, it will impact based on the systems that you have in place. Because like the biggest problem that we always had, and then I want to make sure we put a pin in this and talk about finance and how this all ties to comp plan and the numbers. But like, if you have a major account rep or someone that's supposed to be out, bird dogging it up, like make sure that they're out in front of people instead of like, we had this antiquated quoting process, Gary, when I started. I was like, you have people that are getting paid $150,000 and they're sitting in front of the spreadsheets and they still screw all the stuff up. So I don't know how like the infrastructure and how you hold those kind of people accountable and then how you get them out. How do you balance the people and then the systems?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's different for every company. And, you made me think of one of our clients. We went in there and they had some really, really good hunters. But the way they were structured was I hunt them, I find them, I bring them in. They're part of my, quote, book of business. And then I find more and I build. And pretty soon their best hunters had such a big book of business that they had to service all the time. They had absolutely no time to go out and hunt anymore.
Totally see that all the time. Yep.
And we said, okay, that worked for a period of time, and that was a really good thing to do. You're to the point where you need to start branching off hunters versus account managers. So let's keep some small base of accounts for yourself, but that's going to free up time to go hunt. Of course, we had to fix comp because they're all worried that we're taking away their money in their accounts and they're able to make money.
Yeah.
So we fixed comp, so we made them whole on that. But we started a whole new division to say, you're going to work with existing accounts. We got another client of ours who said, we want you constantly hunting. So every year, and each person had probably 20 accounts. They got to name the 12 accounts I get to keep, and you have to shed 8.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's going to free you up to go find new ones. And every year they kind of just did this exercise. So the salesperson was constantly evaluating their accounts, passing off the ones that were probably maxed out, and kept the core ones that they could still grow up. But they always had to hunt, and that kept them doing just that.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It really depends on where they're at and what their strategy is and what they're trying to get done. But there's several different approaches to fix that.
Well, and I think what happened, that comp is a big one. And so like maybe as we unpack the comp and finances, I'll kind of maybe set some of the foundation of what I learned over the years and what I've seen with our clients is that the comp is just made up randomly. And I think you'll be able to expand on that. And it doesn't tie to the strategic plan and the company finances. So like what we encourage is, okay, if your EBITDA that you're trying to hit is this, and then you say, okay, well, how do we want to get that EBITDA? A combination of new clients, current clients, different products and services. Because like when you wrap all your stuff together with what we're doing and saying, okay, if you want to mitigate your client concentration, sell outside of target. Sell out, don't go get more target, because there's a direct correlation between client diversification and value and products and services. So like when we were trying to build up manage IT, you can take your big strategic plan, and then it all boils down to the numbers too. So you say, okay, well, we want each of these divisions to be doing $500,000 in EBITDA to get to our 1.5 or 2 million or whatever. So tying the numbers in and then layering on the comp plan. So maybe explain that correlation, some exercises, because I too many times, I came from the copy world, right, Gary? Like all the comp plans are based on revenue. I'm like, we're losing money. like the rep made $200,000, but the company didn't get any of the profits. So kind of explain how you see that and what there's probably a lot of stories there.
We could go for 2 days straight.
I was just going to say, I don't know if
there's a lot. That's a lot of options.
Stuff.
Yeah, there really is. And there's 1,000 ways to develop comp plans. But I like where you started is, what are we trying to achieve? Are we trying to achieve growth from existing? Are we trying to go chase new? Are you tasking your reps with doing both, which might be different skill sets, by the way, and we might need to break those apart. But how do we tie it together? And just by way of example, if you wanted your reps to spend 70% of their time on chasing new and 30% of their time on existing, your commission rate should reflect that. Your commission rate should say you're going to get twice as much commission rate, a little bit more than twice as much when you land a new one, because you want that to be aligned. Anybody looking at a comp plan should know immediately how they're going to max it out and where they should spend their time. And that should be aligned with what your strategy is. Mm-hmm. Now, your example of I could sell it and it's based on revenue, but the company's not making any money. That's a very valid thing. The flip side of that is how much can they control? Because there's a lot of times like in software development or IT or whatnot, where the ultimate profitability of any deal is outside of the salesperson's control.
Yeah, very, very good point.
So there are flip sides. My rule of thumb is if they have control over gross margin and they have control over pricing, by God, then we align that comp plan with their discount. So if they're discounting, it's hurting them just as bad.
Yep.
And there's a whole bunch of different sliding scale types of things that you can do on there. But if you have pretty fixed pricing, the price is the price, pay them on top line. That makes perfect sense as well. And you can pay them based on a percentage of sales. You can do it on quota attainment or, cut-ins when they get close. You can do it just on growth. I go back to my e-commerce days. My team chased all the new ones, and we got a percentage of sales over the first year that company was with us. And that percentage of sales ratcheted down each quarter. So by the end of it, they weren't making much off of that because they weren't that involved with that client anymore anyway. So it was very aligned with their activities. However, the team we handed it off to, the account development team, they got paid just on the growth because that was what their job was. So if a company came in and they were doing $100,000 a year with us, and next year they still did $100,000, they didn't make anything off of that. But if they went from $100 to $150,000, they got paid on that $50,000 delta.
Mm-hmm.
So that was aligned with what they were trying to do. That's the biggest thing. And I see too many companies where it's been literally been the same comp plan for 10 to 15 years. We've never changed it. We always paid, people 3.5% of whatever they sold. Strategies changed 12 times there, but we've never changed the comp plan.
Yep.
Or the flip side of that is I see the CEO really trying to motivate people, and they change the comp plan multiple times a year. And if you have a 9-month sales cycle, for example, and your comp plan changes twice a year, you're not driving any behavior whatsoever. You're penalizing them, because when you change the comp plan, I might be 2 months away from closing this deal, and now my comp plan just changed on that. And back to your way earlier point, that really pisses off the salespeople.
Well, and it's like, the analogy is very similar to, even if you layer it up to the business owners that are listening, like the spending is already decreasing because people don't know who the next president's going to be. But if they don't know, if people in general don't know what game they're playing, they just are not as motivated, because you don't know how to win. So it's the same. And in that light, Gary, I don't know what your experience is with and how finance and sales work together from the comp plan side. And maybe to set some context behind that is, you can do probably endless amounts of things with the comp plan, but having good numbers and good data behind the scenes to actually prove the fact that you made some money or not. Because on the top line, I totally agree with that, because managed IT we did, but it was up for the company to be able to make money, to be able to record the numbers. And so I just, I too often see very elementary books, even for, 8-figure companies, where they can't even provide the data from the finance department to the sales department.
Yep. I see the same thing. And I like booking on results, and I'll say reliable data that everybody agrees upon. And if you can get at that, and you make the plan very simple, then it can align with the behavior you're trying to drive. If it gets too complex, and there's 18 different mechanisms, and it depends on this, and then we back this out and we add this back in. Pretty soon the sales guy, I have talked to so many salespeople, I say, how do you know what you're getting paid each month? And they said, I have no idea. It shows up, I assume it's right. I'm not happy with it, but why even have a comp plan if that's what it's going to do? Because it just, I'll back to my earlier statement. A salesperson should be able to look at the comp plan in 1 or 2 minutes, say, oh, this is how I make my money, and that's how it drives.
When I started it, ours used to be so complicated that everybody would say all the stars and the moons have to align.
Oh yeah.
And but we had some really smart reps that would literally figure out how to do it. And you're just like, oh my gosh, the fact that you understood that means you have a PhD in finance. But then you realize that the company got hosed at the end of it. And you go, well, the sales rep's really smart. The comp plan's too complicated, and they're smarter than us.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you get the ones that, I'm not going to pay you until we get collected. And by the way, which you just turned all of your salespeople into a collection department. They're not selling anymore. They're making sure they get collected on stuff. Mm-hmm. And, we get paid on the actual profit at the end of it. By the way, you have no control over what we do on the back end. So now you've just turned all your salespeople into little mini controllers running around saying, well, we should cut costs on this and that and the other. Make it easy. Make it over something that they can control. And like I said, it should be really simple and give immediate direction on how they make their money. So the other thing I want to say is tie it to a goal, because too often I've seen companies that say, I'm paying you X percent. Maybe they even divide it up, X percent on this and Y percent on that, and go max it out. Now, I created my budget assuming that X percent of my people are going to be on goal. But if they say, you know what, I'm at 75% of goal, but I'm good with the money I'm making, well, that doesn't line up with company strategy at all.
Right.
So we like plans that say when you get to 75% of goal, then your accelerator kicks in. Some comp plans don't pay any commission until you reach 75% of goal. And then from 75 to 85%, I make this much. And from 85 to 100, I make more. And then if I go over 100, I make even more yet. All of a sudden, hitting those cut-ins become much more
desirable for everybody.
Important, yes, to that salesperson.
You ever tied it to, are you familiar with what contribution margin is?
Sure.
So if the company's got the data where you can actually say, okay, well, every unit or every project past this, the costs of the company are already covered. So we're making, instead of 25% gross profit, we're making 80. Like there's some interesting ways that you could like literally accelerate where instead of sandbagging it for the next quarter to hit your quota, where you're getting people to get motivated to leverage that.
Not a bad idea. If the salesperson can equate it to whatever behavior I'm doing today, if it's this abstract thing and I'm not sure how it's going to work or where the company is or where our contribution margin works, or if we're over and we've completely lost any incentive at all on that.
Yeah, they can't figure out how, like when and how that happens. Right. It goes back to data. I mean, which is very difficult. So,
it's kind of like a lot of these companies will say, well, I'm paying them X% on margin. At the end of the year, I give them a discretionary bonus. And I see that in a lot of companies. And you know what? It's very generous of the owners to give a discretionary bonus. And I applaud them for, if the company does well, I'm going to share the love. And I think that's all really good. It does. And if that's the intention, awesome.
Mm-hmm.
If the intention is to drive a behavior, it doesn't. You're paying somebody next January for something they did in February or March or April or whatnot, and it's too separated from the actual behavior to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time when we ask those people, the salespeople, what is that discretionary bonus on? What did you have to do to earn it? I would say the vast majority have no clue. They're like, I don't know. It's usually around $5,000 or $10,000. And I bank on it, by the way.
Right. It's in their income calculation, and
absolutely.
And it is such a frustrating part too, because with the whole data and expectations. I mean, you can literally just create more scenarios to have conflict for no reason. You have okay, so now if I don't do this, Gary, you're going to be upset with me. When which is not the point, right? And they have no control over it. So for an owner that's sitting there going, okay, I got it, I get it, guys. Like I know that I have loosey-goosey comp plans. I kind of have some account managers. I have people that have been here for a long time, like long-term relationships, and it's just kind of there. What does the process look like to go from, because it probably gives them anxiety going, okay, it's going to create some disruption, right? So what is the process that you guys go through or that you would recommend to say, okay, how do you go from that loosey-goosiness to like an actual repeatable sales process with people?
Good question. And again, 1,000 different ways to create a comp plan, but from a high level.
Well, not even comp plan, Gary. I'm talking like from their people, right? So like in their situation, it's like almost maybe a layer up, and you can answer the comp plan too. But I'm just thinking of a client in particular that'll probably be listening to this where they've kind of gone through some processes recently, but there's quite a few of them where it's like, okay, I have people there. I've got people that are / account managers, project managers, some kind of hunting, kind of a sales leader. Like it's all kind of just in the fray, kind of going back to your whole 6 factors. How do you go from there to, I know I need to do things, but I don't know how to put one foot in front of each other?
Well, let's start with the strategy. What are we trying to get done? Are we chasing new? Are we going after new markets? Are we trying to grow existing? What are we trying to do? Is our team best structured to do that? Do we have the point, like I talked about earlier, where none of my hunters are hunting anymore? That might be a time to look at it and divide it up. And when we decide how we're going to structure the team, then we get really crystal clear on defining what that role is. Your job is to go chase new. Your job is to go grow existing. Your job is to go after this new product. But we get super clear on that. And we get our processes all documented so everybody knows how to do their job. And then I like to layer back in the comp plan and start with, and if they're at goal, here's a starting point we have that just, it makes all the sense in the world, but people don't think about it this way. I look at the market and say, if a person's doing a good job in my market, how much money should they make in total? And you can do market studies and you can look at competition and you can look at all kinds of stuff. And I'll just randomly say, a good salesperson's making $150,000. And you go, okay, and what's their base? What's competitive in the market? $100,000. Okay, I have $50,000 to play with. That's where I'm going to start my comp plan and say, and what do I want them to do? I want them to go chase new and maybe a little existing. Okay, so I'm going to pay them twice as much on new than I am on existing. Or my job is only to grow existing accounts. Okay, I'm going to pay them on growth. But I use that variable to set direction in that comp plan. But I always start with, what's the total? At goal, what is the total? And a lot of people have a hard time saying, I don't know, what should that be? Go do some market research. There's studies you can get. You can go to glassdoor.com or salary.com, see what other people are being paid and whatnot. But let's start with, if somebody's producing and they're at goal, at quota, What should they make? And then you can start backing into numbers.
That's awesome. And then, so kind of continue that train of thought, then is it the system? So yeah, you're kind of just, it's really just the people, the goals, and then the structure. And it's such I think what the purpose of this interview is, it doesn't have to be this big, huge ball of anxiety, right? Especially if they don't come from sales, because there's a process behind it.
I go back to what we said a little while ago, that it's not rocket science. It's just like your manufacturing. It's just like your operations. There's a strategy. There's a process. We're measuring the process. We have a good people systems. We have good training systems, and there's accountability. We sit down and say, okay, how are you doing? Brian, did you get your 5 opportunities this week? No? Okay, what do we got to do differently? Or yes? Awesome. Keep doing that. Mm-hmm. You're doing a great job. But there has to be a sit down and review of how people are doing so we can make adjustments. And too often, the only time anybody gets talked to about their actual performance, we get talked to every day about deals and issues and whatnot, but the only time anybody actually talks about performance is there's already an issue.
Right. And, and even if so kind of this ties into, as we're wrapping up here, what your company is doing and how, if you're even the owner, and the owner's got to be managing, because I think that's where maybe, as you're it's probably maybe on the lower end of your clients, but if the owner's then trying to manage the sales leader, right? Because if the sales leader hasn't been trained, the owner hasn't been trained either about how to manage a sales leader.
Right.
So, you're sitting there being able to have these kind of collaborative conversations, so that way it's not just made up on how they're managing the sales leadership. So with that being said, maybe kind of tee it up on that answer. And then what are some of the resources that you've got available and the links for people?
Yeah. So you can learn more about what we do. You can go to pivataladvisors.com, but we help them in a few different ways. If I'm dealing directly with a sales leader, we actually sit in and we give them a structure for having conversations. We give them, here's what a good scorecard looks like. What does your scorecard look like? Let's adapt this. We'll sit in their one-on-ones and listen to them. And when the person walks out the door, we'll say, okay, how did that go? Did we address their performance issue? Do they have specific direction on what to do? Did we give them some things to work on? Do they know they're having a problem? Here's my favorite. My brother always calls it, did you take the monkey? Meaning your salesperson comes in and says, I have all these problems. And the sales leader goes, I'll fix them for you. So now all of their problems became your problems. You took the monkey. That's a bad thing. You should be working on how are you going to fix this? And here's some ideas and what are you going to do? And they make commitments. That's the exact same conversation the sales leader should be having with the CEO. It's another huge miss in these companies, because the CEO and the sales leader say, well, we talk all the time anyway. I know what's going on.
Totally.
But they never talk about, are we doing against plan? Where are we going to come in for sure? What's at risk? How's the team doing? What are you working on? What are the big challenges you have? That's a formal, structured conversation. And when you have that on a regular basis, and don't blow it off because we're busy or we got other stuff going on, but we have that on a weekly or biweekly basis, boy, the sales leader and the owner stay really aligned, and we can discuss what's going on. We have a much better view of what's coming in. We're more consistent. We're more predictable, which every sales owner in the world wants. They want to know what's going on with their cash. If we have that structured conversation and we make adjustments together, that's a key to having a healthy sales.
Yeah, and when you and I were sitting down with coffee about a month ago, we were talking about how the strategic plan that should be marching towards a valuation and towards a multiple, on the road. Say, okay, now what is our how sales and finance collaborate together? Saying, okay, if you actually did a roll-up budget, the 12-month budget, and then a 1, 3, and 5 year out projections. You say, okay, here's the forecast. So if we're going to hit 10 million in revenue, here's the makeup of it, products and services. Here's the gross profit. And so then the CFO and then the sales leader should say, okay, now that then trickles down into the W-2 income that it all should roll up. And like you said, it can't just be we're just having fun and chatting a lot, because if the owner if the finance team doesn't hold the salespeople accountable, then how you might not have enough money to pay for your bills, right?
Yeah. And too often I hear a sales leader say things like, well, I give him all the reports he should be able to go through and see what we're doing. But if you look at all the reports and everything that's the pipeline, you can have a $10 million a year company, and the pipeline says we're going to do 43 million this quarter. No, what's real, what's not real. That's your job as a sales leader, to communicate that to the owner, to finance, to everybody else. So again, back to your original question, how do we help these guys? Is we'll sit with the sales leader, we'll help them build out this stuff, we'll help them be a better sales leader, and how do you leverage all this? Sometimes our clients are what you just said. The CEO's been trying to manage the team, and they have a day job. They got to run the business and they got to do everything else. And they realize that they're not doing a stellar job as a sales leader. We actually insert one of our people in there and act as the sales leader on a fractional basis. And then for anybody interested too, we also have a peer group just for sales leaders. So once a month they get together, they learn best practices around hiring or onboarding or interviewing or implementing sales process or CRM or whatever it happens to be. But they learn best practices. They can apply them. We get tools online, and then we assign them a coach so we can help answer questions and help them do stuff. So we try to work with them in various different ways depending on where they're at.
It's awesome. I mean, you're actually being a resource for people that instead of just trying to figure it all on your own.
Yeah.
What's the best way to get in touch with you?
From all my mistakes in the past.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's the whole point, right?
That's right.
What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Pivotalitadvisors.com is our website. You can send me an email if you'd like to at gbbraun@pivotalitadvisors.com. If you want to follow us on Twitter, I'm at gdbraun11. On LinkedIn, I'm on all the social media channels.
We'll put all the links into the show notes, and it's been a blast having you on the show, Gary.
Always like talking to another sales guy.